This is the
Welcome
US.
back. What, you got back from a long trip, didn't you? Just today or yesterday?
No, no, I went to London for Capital Crimes, but that was a month ago.
And
Oh,
we're live.
Are we live? Wonderful. All
yeah.
right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are when you're watching this. Um, Donna is in Switzerland. I'm in Scottsdale. I'm Barbara Peters, and you're here actually to be talking to Donna Leon about her new book, A Refiner's Fire, which, if you have been in Arizona or paying any attention to lots of the news headlines, you will recognize that the Gilbert Goons, the overprivileged, underparented, and generally criminally oriented group in our area is reflected in Venice. And so Donna often talks about social themes, ethical issues. It's not so much about the crime, it's about all the things around it. And so I suggested to her she bone up on the Gilbert Goons, but maybe you didn't have
No,
time
I
to do
haven't.
it.
I haven't. No, I thought you were going to talk about how hot it is there.
Yes, which at the moment may be quelling any kind of crime wave. It's just too hot to be out.
How hot is it there?
It's 116, something like that. But you know, don't if you live here, everything, I know everything's air conditioned. And so it's kind of like being in Minnesota in January
Yeah,
when you would stay in your house mostly to keep warm, and
yeah.
here we stay inside to keep cool. There is nothing not air conditioned here. Your
Mm,
car, your house, your
mm.
stores, the malls. And in fact, the air conditioning is so powerful that most of us take jackets when we go to the mall or go to the movies because it's so cold. I know it's different. Right. Can you tilt your screen, Donna, down just a little bit? We're seeing all ceiling and not head. There we go. That's way better. Yay.
Okay.
Anyway, it's fine. And I'm inside talking to you, which is wonderful. But usually we're not doing it in July.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, because it comes out much earlier, usually in March or April.
Right.
Mm.
Well, it's not a bad thing to kind of move time around. The only time that I was actually in Venice, it was 105. And I can remember, I think I might have told you this. We spent our entire time on the Vaporetti. I saw Murano, I saw Barato,
Yeah.
because it was the only way to really keep cool, except for that really nice hotel that has its own service to the own gondolas to the airport. It's just to the right of or to the side of where they have the Biennale. It's not in the
Mhm.
Giudecca, it's got an English name, I think. Can't remember. It'll come to me.
It'll
But
come to you.
anyway, they had air conditioning, which is why I moved us into it. And the other thing that I really loved is that they had linen sheets and they ironed them every day. Every day you got new ironed linen sheets. So that was a
Right.
luxury that I was totally unprepared for.
Good. Yeah, there's nothing like, well, there's nothing like linen.
No, there isn't. But my point was, I was hotter in Venice than I have ever been in Phoenix. And a lot of it is because there was almost no escape from it.
Yeah. And there is less air conditioning. The
Right.
hotels will have it, but people don't have it in their homes.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the hotels don't even have it. But anyway, let's talk about a refiner's fire. Since you're a Handelian and an opera lover, and a refiner's fire is clearly a title that you've taken from that. Why did you apply that to this book?
Well, a refiner's fire is something that burns at a particularly high temperature because a refiner has to melt gold or has to melt metal because the metal is being refined. And the book deals with a situation in which things go very, very high in temperature because there's a very strong there's a very big fire at the end. And I couldn't resist finally putting a phrase of Handel's into as the title of the book instead of the
Of
little
course you couldn't. I totally understand it. The minute I saw it, I said, aha.
uh-huh, she's been at work.
Aha.
She's been listening to the Messiah. Ah.
She is. Actually, Donna gives me opera advice, and I recently discussed with her whether I should go to opening night, September 30th at the Met to see Rigoletto. But my problem is that it is a modern production. And I took a look at it, and the people on stage are wearing jack boots and all. And I just can't bring myself to take a plot that is so preposterous in part, but certainly period. What's the word I want? Rooted in its time and apply it to a modern setting. So thanks to Donna, who said, don't do that.
I should have been more broad-minded and suggested that you look at the name of the director and then take a look at what he or she has done in the past. Because sometimes modern productions are wonderful. Some of the best things I've seen have been modern stage. Robert Carson's Semele
Yeah.
is one of the best opera productions I've ever seen, and it's set in London in 1999, maybe. It's absolutely contemporary, and it's glorious.
Well, I admit that it was actually the jack boots that put me off.
Yeah, well, jack boots are jack boots.
Yeah, I just can't quite go with that. Anyway, instead we're going to take friends out to dinner, but I was really torn at the thought of being able to be in New York and go to both Mets in one day.
Oh, good.
I know. So anyway, but Donna and I spent a lot of time talking about opera, and those of you who are long-term fans of Donna know that she has written certainly her first book involved, which I'm trying to think who, anyway, there was a television, or was it a movie? Was it television? Was it an early TV?
No, he was in, it happened in La Fenice, so it was live. Well, the death was live.
No. I meant there was a film or in the long series that the Germans
Oh,
produced.
yeah, they did one.
Um,
I didn't see it because I didn't watch them.
Right. But anyway, Death at La Fenice does take place in the old Venice Opera House before it burned down, presumably, and
Yeah.
got rebuilt. And so there have been music themes. But if I look behind me, God, I can't even turn my neck. I have a whole collection of Donna's books, and one of them involves, which one is it? About opera or music or
First
something?
one, and I
No,
think,
I don't mean the Brunettis. I meant, isn't it one of your nonfiction books?
oh, what's it? The Jewels of Paradise.
Aha.
Yeah, it's about music, but it's not a mystery. I wrote it, it must be 15 years ago, if not more, because Cecilia Bartoli, who's a friend of mine,
Okay.
was about to record a disc by a not very well-known composer. And to stir a little interest in the composer, she asked me if I would write a book, if I would write something for her. And I said, of course. And she said, would you write a book? And I said, well, what kind of book do you mean? And he said, no, we were speaking Italian, un fiction.
Uh-huh.
Fiction isn't an Italian word, but I know what it means. So she wanted me to write a novel about Stefani, this very interesting and at times very good composer. And I did, with no murder. And it was a very lighthearted book, if a crime book can be lighthearted. She was pleased with it. The concert was wonderful. The disc is really excellent. The music's good, but I don't think it's much more than that. And that was the other opera book. I would love to write another book about her. But
That would be really fascinating. Now, I looked up because handily in the front of my advanced reading copy, probably the finished copy, there is a list of Donna's, which is a very impressive list that keeps growing of all of Donna's books. And the book I was referring to was Handel's Bestiary. I just can't remember.
Yeah.
Right.
It was sort of a kid's book. It was a book with a disc, and in it, a soprano and a mezzo soprano sang the arias in Handel's operas about animals,
Right.
because it's filled with them. I think Alan Curtis, may he rest in peace, said just off the when we talked about for the first time animals in his operas, he said, yeah, I think there are 33 arias for animals. Do you know your Handel, Maestro Cortes? So we recorded maybe 13 of them, 13, 14 of them, with a very good soprano and a very good mezzo, and had great fun because we took it on tour. And it worked with children who had never, ever heard this music in their lives, started to conduct. At times in the concerts, kids would stand up because they don't know the protocol of an opera or a concert performance. And they stood up and waved their arms the way the man in the front was waving his arms. It was really wonderful. And it gave me, no doubt, illusory hope that kids will grow up to people who might listen to this kind of music. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if that's true.
I don't know if it's illusory. I mean, I think it's certainly a dream to hold on to. I brought it up because I think that Donna, while she's known probably best to most of you for her wonderful crime novels with Commissario Guido Brunetti and all the other players in it, has also had fun writing other things. And one of the reasons that she lives where she does is so she can attend more operas, right?
Yeah.
Yep, very, very good setting for that. So, one thing I did mean to mention to you, there is a book we're doing next week, a Zoom event. It's in the Robert Ludlum series. You know how it is when oftentimes authors that were popular, other people take up their mantle and write it. And Brian Freeman has written a really brilliant book. I'm trying to remember what it's called now, Robert Ludlum's Burns, whatever. But anyway, almost all of it takes place in Zurich and also in Switzerland. And so I thought of you because he does a wonderful job describing the original scene, up in the mountains or something. But then a huge amount of it is in Zurich. And he does a lovely job talking about the city and all of its charms.
It's a lovely city. It's really a wonderful place.
Yeah.
It's very low, surprisingly, for a city as prosperous and beautiful as it is. It's very low keyed.
I've only been there once, and I remember dining on the lake. There were, any number of cafes and so forth along the lake, and I really enjoyed it. I would love to go back. I'm addicted to Swiss trains. I've only taken them a few times, but all of a sudden there's been a burst on Instagram of videos about the Bernini Express or the Glacier Express and all, and extremely favorable fares from Switzerland if you want to do that. So. Anyway, as often, we've really strayed. Let's go back to our Finder's Fire, which is ostensibly why we're here. And it begins with a teenage boy or a group of boys who've been arrested and what happens to them. So did you actually observe something like that, yourself?
Yeah. There's a new criminal phenomenon in Italy that I really don't understand yet. I'm sure, I hope that I soon will. And because the phenomenon is so un-Italian, they had to give a non-Italian name to it. So there are groups of young boys, sometimes girls, but usually boys, that are called baby gangs. Because it's a gang of kids, but they're baby. They're not grown-up people. These are baby gangs. They're kids maybe in their late teens or their mid-teens who just go out to raise hell. Yeah. They have, to date, they don't steal a lot. They don't burst into stores and run off with the crown jewels. They just they meet people on the street and give them a hard time, or they meet other rival baby gangs. And there's a kind of Romeo and Juliet, Montague and Capulet scene. It's very, very strange. And it's upsetting in a peculiar way because this phenomenon of the bad teenager is new to Italy.
Really?
And yeah. Usually, my experience of, I guess, 40 years living in the country is that teenagers are well behaved in public. They are polite. They are educati. One of the worst things you can say to an Italian is sei maleducato. It has nothing to do with education. It means that you are badly behaved. Can you imagine a society that tells kids the worst thing you can say to a child is that he's badly behaved? Usually it's he's a serial killer before anyone says anything. And it is spreading. There's no central control, there's no organization that unites them. It's just groups of kids from the same city or the same area in a city who go out to raise hell and cause trouble and to damage things. It's very, very spooky.
What degree do you think they're connected by social media? Do you think that's enabled them to
Yeah,
arrange
yeah,
rendezvous and so forth in a
yeah,
way that before social media would have been
yeah,
almost impossible?
yeah. We will meet at the corner of na 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 and na na na. And then if something happens that stops someone from getting there, or in the case of Venice, if a boat skips its course and the boat's going to be 20 minutes late, they can tell the other members of the baby gang that they're going to be 20 minutes late for whatever it is they decide to do. And you just don't know what they're going to do. They're going to go into a store, they're maybe going to start a fire, um, beat somebody up on the street, attack another bunch of kids. That's become violence among young people is also becoming more
Well,
common.
unfortunately, things like that tend to escalate because, the initial thrill of just getting together fades, and then
Yeah.
you have to up the game in order to make it more thrilling. But this is exactly what has gone on with the Gilbert Goons here, except that they actually beat a teenager to death. So there's a murder involved and criminal charges involved. So it escalated to a higher degree than what you're talking
Was
about.
was the other kid beaten to death for any reason?
No, just because they could. And then the huge question is, where were the Gilbert police and why weren't they paying attention to this? And where were the parents in all this? And, you know, it's, sort of like nobody really wanted to address it. And many of them are being let off on probation at the moment. So there's really big questions. Los Angeles, as you probably know, has been plagued by gangs, with a lot
For
of young
years, for
people
decades.
for years, decades, right? But this is really new in the sense that these are kids from an upscale. These are not kids, living in low
Yeah,
cost housing or on the streets or anything. These are really overprivileged kids who but I think again, I think social media is so much part of that dynamic. But what's interesting, and they don't seem to quite grasp that, is by using social media, they also make it possible to identify them.
yeah, yeah. They
There's
can be
a
treated
disconnect,
respectfully.
and you have to wonder how many of them somehow think that they're in some privacy bubble,
Mm.
posting stuff and doing stuff, even though they are, in fact, making themselves available to public scrutiny. So
And
is that
after,
also what's happening in your situation?
yeah, it happens. And they also forget that they are producing evidence for the prosecution by
Mhm.
saying, "Ooh, let's beat the shit out of them," or
Right.
allowing or taking pictures while they're beating someone up.
Yeah.
This is another phenomenon because the Italian gutter press will always, the day after, show the picture, show the photo, or the many photos that were taken by many people from, and this is spooky. I don't have a telefonino. I don't have a phone. So I don't have a camera. I can't film everything. And it always amazes me that everything now is filmed.
Yeah.
When someone's being arrested by the police or shot by the police, there's always 4 or 5 people who have filmed it.
There is no privacy as people, used to understand it.
Yeah.
Also, in many places, London is a great example. I told you I was just there a few
Mhm.
weeks ago. There's hardly a square inch that doesn't have, cameras.
Cameras.
And so even if you're not filming it, if you watch any like British crime shows, the first
Mhm.
thing that the officers who arrive at the scene do is they call for, the CCR footage. And, they're able to It's amazing how often they are able to solve things by trolling through this enormous amount of footage and they find a license plate or, a person visible through the windshield of a car or whatever. So I've often wondered why people criminally minded don't have enough sense to leave their phones at home. But, geo-tracking or whatever it all is. But anyway, so you've got, coming back to the book, you've got a group of teenagers who are released to their parents' custody, but
Mhm.
one of them falls into the lap of Commissario Claudia Grifoni, who gets a good part in this book, and she's really an interesting person to spend time with.
Yeah, I like Grifoni. I'm very, very glad that she stumbled into these books because she's Signorina Elettra is limited in what she can say to Brunetti because she's an employee. They are colleagues, they're not friends.
Right.
And many of the people, Vianello's really his only friend there. So he's always got this problem of who he can talk to openly and honestly. And Grifoni fills that position, I think, very well. She's his age. She's maybe of his social background. We don't know a lot of the private stuff about her. She has a kid that she mentions only in moments of stress. But she's a blank, as is often the case when people work together. They really don't know their colleagues as people. They know them
Right.
as workers. So she's useful to have, and she likes this kid because he's a decent kid. He's a nice kid. He's interested in things, and he's respectful, and he's been well raised. So he and Grifoni get on well. But the kid's been busted along with the others in the baby gang, and she shouldn't be seen around him, particularly if this is going to go to trial or if there's going to be legal repercussions. She should not be a friend of one of the accused, but she works around them.
So I'm trying to remember how soon this comes into play and if it's a spoiler, but he has an interesting parent of his
Yeah,
own.
the boy has an interesting parent because in the books very often people that you meet on page 27, on page 107, you get that these two are connected. You didn't know that before. His father is an ex-hero or an aging hero. He was in the Italian armed forces that went to Iraq in the 1990s, maybe.
I think so. I think it has to be the 90s. I know it's getting hard to remember, isn't it?
When was that?
I
What
know.
he was a hero because one of the recent historical events that every Italian knows about is Nasseria. In fact, I was maybe 6 months ago at an opera rehearsal in some little bitty podunk town somewhere near Padua. It couldn't have had more than 500, 600 people living in it. And one of the plaques up on the wall was to the memory of our heroes who died at Nasseria. And the campo, the square in which this piece of marble stood was Campo Vittime di Victims of Nasseria. In Nasseria, I forget the month, I think it was in the fall, the Italians had a headquarters, and two Iraqi citizens forced a truck loaded with ammunition and explosives through the entrance into this caserma, into this building, and blew to hell, I think, 19 serving Italian soldiers, which is the worst death event since the Second World War. I was here when it happened, and the country just stopped because they see themselves, and I think justly, as good guys as far as the current military situation. If you're going to be occupied, maybe it's better to be occupied by the Italians than by, I don't know, I can't name a country. And it turns out that this guy was a hero at Nasiriyah. He was one of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 men who were very, very badly burned. But he was burned performing a heroic deed. And so he's well known in the city, but there's something, Brunetti's sentence is pretty early. There's something oily about him. There's something strange about this guy. And since it was in every paper in Europe, Nasiriyah, and this guy really became a celebrity. He was a carabinieri. He shouldn't give Brunetti the creeps, but he does. And as the book progresses, we learn more and more about him, Monforte, Sargente Monforte. And sure enough, he was not up to saving Iraqis when he was in Iraq.
So Orlando, his son, Orlando Monforte, is the one that forms a bond with Grifoni.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I mean, there's so much to think about in this book, not just you're tense thinking that something is going to happen, that this gang or these gangs and all are not going to just get up to a little bit of mischief, that something bigger is going to happen, which we aren't going to discuss. But there is that sort of sense of acceleration, which I think is true in many of your books. It often is it doesn't always start with a big crime. Sometimes it's some small thing, and then gradually it builds up. And I've often wondered, do you build your plots on things that you're seeing as happening in society so you can particularly address some issue, which is often an ethical issue? Or
Yeah.
how does it work? Because, your books have such definite themes as we move along through them.
This one started with my complete befuddlement with the baby gangs. I can't figure that out. So I knew that if I wrote about them, I would have to read about them. So I spent a long time and talking to my friend down at the Questura about this phenomenon. And it was really quite depressing that, because you don't expect teenagers to be bad, and most of them are a pain in the ass, but that comes with the age. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to cause a little bit of trouble and make your parents stay up late at night when you're 15, 16, 17. That's your job. But you're not supposed to be busted for beating someone to death. That's not part of your dance card. And in Italy, even less so, because young people have always been much better behaved than I've observed in other countries. So I wanted to study that. And then I don't know where I got the idea of the father of Monforte. Yeah. There was a time when the book was going to be about art fraud. No, art theft. And because after the siege of Baghdad, which lasted only about 10 minutes, I'm afraid, after the conquest of Baghdad, it was revealed that it was public, the library and the museum were sacked. In fact, I still remember, I have an image of a man wearing boots standing in the courtyard of the library of Baghdad, which had thousands of 1,000-year-old Qurans, standing up to his knees in ashes. And I remember too, because at the time I was looking a lot at eBay, about 2 months after the Americans did not stop the sack of the library and the museum. A lot of Middle Eastern artifacts and pages from Qurans went up on eBay. And I was told by other people who were using eBay at the time. I just looked and that those were not things that I wanted to buy because I didn't want to contribute to what had happened. But people I know who did buy said that they found incredible things on eBay, things that should have been in a library.
But there again, our digital age allows what used to be, the fence to have turned into eBay. I mean, sacking and looting has been part of war since,
Since
ancient
since
times. I mean, if you watch the George Clooney film about the Monument Men, for example, as everybody was closing in on Berlin at the end of the war, there was a race between the Americans who were trying to protect things in theory, and the Russians, hoping that
we're
they
hauling
could.
it back to Moscow.
Right. And then it turned out inevitably that there were American soldiers who, made off with this and that. And I think that's always a consequence of war, but it is indeed horrendously distressing, and indeed you don't want to be part of it.
Mm.
So that's interesting, and I can see where the art fraud part would have come into play, but you went a different way. The other theme in this book, I think, and is exemplified in the aging Enzo Bocchese, the
Mm.
Castura's chief lab technician, is in contrast to these young people, is dilemmas of aging. Can you still do your job? Do you have fewer people that care about you? Do you have fewer people to protect you? What about those things that you treasured and amassed? What becomes of them? Because that's part of who he is, right?
Mhm. I think that I'm 81 now, so I'm getting to the point where those thoughts are there. They are obviously I'm going to think about them. And I look at all of this stuff that I've accumulated over the years. I don't think I even have one good painting. I don't have one uh, famous, very expensive, very elaborate, or very simple paint. I don't. I just have a lot of stuff that I liked. So I have an 18th century woman who I believe might have been what's her name? The woman, um, Admiral Nelson's lover.
Oh, right.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
it'll come to me. The one that
it'll
started
come to
out at
me.
16
Yeah,
dancing on
yeah.
tables and right, eventually.
um,
Emma, isn't her name?
Emma Hamilton. Well, Emma Hamilton,
Right.
because Emma Hamilton, because she
That's
was
it.
married to the ambassador. But I might have 100 pieces, but nothing in it is worth more than about $10. But to me, it's precious. So I don't want, if they go away, I want them to go to a good home. It's just crazy because they don't deserve good homes because they're not, they're just, they're just stuff. But I think this is a common, I don't want to call it a problem because it's not a problem. It's a pain in the neck. It happens to you when you get older and you don't know what to do with the stuff you have. Money's easy. Money is easy. You get this and you get that and you get this and you get that. But who's going to want my Japanese garden trolls? I have a collection from someone who kept sending them to me of the most grotesquely ugly garden trolls, but I love them and I can't part with them. Also, the problem is double because nobody's going to love them the way I love them.
So true. I am currently the executor of my sister and brother-in-law's estate, along with my own brother. And, you certainly learn from that what meant things to other people,
Yeah.
doesn't mean a lot to you. I mean, look
Doesn't
where I'm
mean
sitting, and what is it that I have to think about? I'm even older than you are. So, I look at all of this behind me and I think, who is going to care about some of it doesn't have a lot of me. Who's going to care about my signed Donna Leon books? And
exactly.
where should I, and if you don't specify something, this is the lawyer in me, if you don't actually just make a disposition about it, then you're leaving it up to kind of, the random universe about, so, do I want to take all my Donna Leons and, gift them to somebody? Do I want to, if you had an archive here in the United States, it's been suggested to me that all my Tony Hillerman's way up here go to the Tony
Mhm.
Hillerman Center at the University of New Mexico in
Yeah.
Albuquerque, because I have some rare ones. So that's kind of easy. But what do I do, with ones that it's hard to imagine a specific destination? Or do I let some, my kids or some random person come in and just, disperse something that I've
Because they don't know. They don't know.
it also doesn't mean anything to them, in the way that it does to you. I had an author write to me recently who's been in my house, and she said, it's interesting. She said, almost everything in your house is something you've collected as you've traveled or as it means something to you. It isn't done by some decorator that we paid to come in and
Oh,
whatever.
jeez.
But that makes it even more difficult to figure out, family photographs. There's a real wow what to do with those. So you've got that, and you are looking at Enzo, and he has a collection of sculptures. So tell us about his sculptures that are of
He has
concern
a
to him.
he has a collection, and this I stole from a late friend of mine who had a collection of bronze statues, maybe this big, maybe smaller. All were classical themes: naked Venuses, naked Hercules, Hercules fighting something, an animal or a person. Um, really, really beautiful things and precious things. But he doesn't have any contact with his family. His family's never been mentioned. He's not married. He's not living with someone. And he too is concerned about what to do. And I can understand his concern because he has pieces which have great financial and historical value. And I think that people who love art of any century, of any, I won't say any quality, who love, and we can't get into an argument, not an argument, but a discussion of what is art and what is not art. But someone who has good taste and classic taste wants someone to love the things he loves. I don't care if people love this stuff. People, they just have to put it up on the wall and laugh when they see it. Um, but I think that passion for beauty, which many, many people have, is made very uncomfortable when you don't know who's going to get it. When you give your car away, you want someone who's going to take good care of the car because you had so much fun driving that car around. And it's a very, very human concern.
Yeah.
Since I don't plan these books, I don't have an outline for any of them. I just dive in and keep going. I never know what's going to pop up. So it's very often interesting to me to see a subject and say, ooh, why are you thinking about that, Donna? And I never know what the subject is going to be.
Right. Well, but that's part of your creative process, and you have confidence in it because it's worked for you for,
Yeah, it's worked.
so many books. So basically, it seemed to me that this book is really about risk. We have teenagers who are at risk. We have a particular teenager who's at risk. We have a policewoman who ends up at risk for befriending the teenager. We have an older man who is, we think, sense is going to be at risk. And we
Mhm.
have his beautiful statues that are at risk. Whereas Brunetti in this case he's almost in many ways more like an observer. I mean, sometimes he's a lot more active, but
Mhm.
I felt, um, I mean, in some cases, he really has people at risk, in earlier books,
Mhm.
his children were, I'm trying to remember, was it his mother or his mother-in-law? It was his mother, right? As she was aging. And
Mhm.
so, and then, you know, Paula's never really been at risk, but the whole relationship with her parents has always been an interesting facet of,
Mhm.
and has grown. And was it the last book where we had the nun who was, that was a fascinating book. I think it was the last one where it turned out it was the nun and the convent and the boundaries and so forth.
Oh yeah, the nice nun
Right, the nice
with the
nun.
dog, with the
Right.
secret dog.
Yep. But so this one, we have risk for young people, we have risk for a middle-aged person, and we have risk for an elderly person. And some of it is more threatening than others. But did you sort of feel like the risk built as you put this book together, that you were putting people in that position?
No, I didn't, but I know that I am very, very concerned about the times in which we live because I think they're risky. I don't mean to sound like the crazy lady who's always screaming about climate, about the climate. But the fact that you're in an air-conditioned building, um, and how many millions of people are in air-conditioned buildings, and how many hundreds of millions of people in other countries on other continents. Something's coming, boys and girls. Something's coming, and we are not prepared for it at all. I'm prepared for it in a certain way because I live at 1400 meters, and I'm sleeping under a duvet these nights because it's cold here at night. And sometimes I have a fire in the I have to light a fire to keep the house, the kitchen warm, because I don't want to heat this big house just to keep me warm from 7 o'clock at night until 11 o'clock at night. That doesn't seem right. And I the risk I think is that nobody's taken this seriously. A couple of people who count, in the terms of politics. Some people are concerned, but you never hear, it's never discussed. No one, I'm waiting for the politician who stands up at his or her inauguration and says, okay, okay, kids, we're going to forget everything. We're going to forget about war. We're going to forget about conquering this country. We're going to worry about the temperature and what we can do while we still have a chance. Because in 5 years, we're not going to have a chance. And sometimes when I say things like this, I realize that I do sound like the crazy lady on the corner with the sign.
No, no, I don't think you do. I mean, the evolution of Earth has always had climate shifts up and down. Otherwise, there wouldn't be coal in Siberia.
Mhm.
At one point it had to be tropical. I mean, if you drive around Arizona up in this beautiful red rock country up north, clearly there was a large underground sea there at one point,
Mhm.
now gone. The glaciers have come and gone, and that kind of stuff has been going on forever, but we've accelerated climate change is really what's happening. I don't know. I've always sort of had a theory that Mother Earth basically goes for correction when things get out of hand. And it just may be that, there are too many people and she's thinking, I
Mhm.
mean, this is a really epochal sort of vision on my
Yeah.
part. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I don't think it's improbable that there are too many people for the space and resources available. And at some point, she may just decide, and I don't mean she in a
Well,
personal way, but just, may decide on a corrective. And maybe the people who are writing science fiction and all and talking about taking us to a different place, are thinking in those terms that maybe, Earth people need to immigrate to somewhere else, just like currently people in horrible hot places are trying to immigrate to places that are richer and cooler. I don't know, Natasha Pulley, who's a really brilliant British author, wrote an amazing book. I talked to her about it in the spring, about that very question about a colony and how it was managed and which people from Earth were able to move to the colony and what they had to go through to acclimatize to gravity changes and all kinds of
Mhm,
things. And the same issues of, well, we were here, so we don't want you to come behind us and all that kind of thing were still in play.
mhm.
So I don't know. I mean, you and I are not going to probably live long enough to see,
No, no.
all of this. We're in our 80s and, um, we'll see. But I agree with you that it is urgent that we take what steps we can. But unfortunately, as we appear to be living in a time of real self-interest, maybe more than, I don't know, maybe it's always been like this, but I don't see any politicians who are actually statesmen in the sense that they are looking for the common weal, WEAL, as
Yeah.
was once written. I
Yeah.
don't see anybody that really, maybe Zelensky comes close to that in a sense that he's trying to protect something. But certainly in this country, it's very hard to find a politician that I could say I thought was working for the common good or
Well,
any good.
I think a lot of the madness is invisible. I was reading The Guardian, which I read online every morning, and they were writing about air conditioning because the article had to do with air conditioning, and they said that in this place, which was in America, people were being encouraged to turn their heat, to turn their air conditioning, to lower it to 76 degrees Fahrenheit. And I thought, now, now wait a minute, wait a minute, 76 degrees? That's could maybe 86 degrees or 80 degrees. Maybe there could be a little bit of discomfort.
Right.
Maybe you would be willing to, and I think that that's the explanation for that number, that very few people are willing to suffer discomfort. Now, I would rather be alive and uncomfortable than dead and comfortable. And I think that this is a paradox. We lack the politician who has the courage to stand up and say, look, we got to turn the air conditioning down. You don't have to turn it off, but you have to turn it down. And you can't heat your houses to 84 degrees in the winter because you don't need it. But
Well,
there is a politician who
the
does it.
world doesn't have an endless supply of electricity. And as Hurricane Beryl just showed us, at least in Texas, once again, that when the power goes off, in point of fact, all these things, that make us comfortable also go away with them. And so, how much water is there? How much? Well, we can't solve that. We really can't. So, but it's certainly worth thinking about. Um, yeah.
It becomes more, I mention it repeatedly because it has become perhaps an annoying theme in the books. But it's very often referred to and written about. And I suppose it will continue because it's just so much part of our lives.
Yeah. But, I mean, your books are in fact created out of your life and, your experiences and what you're seeing. And, I think that's why people love them. They're so human. The people in them and the issues that are involved are, um, things that should concern us all and very
Very
universal.
nice to hear.
Well, I've been reading you since very beginning. You and I have walked around in London together and talked about things. And, it's been a real privilege to have watched all of your books unfold and some degree shape thinking. So I thank you for that. I forgot to mention that these are actually a few of the autographed copies we have left of the American edition, but the British edition, which Donna is going to be signing, has a very different cover, and we have some of those coming. So if you want to pop onto poisonpen.com, you can reserve one. because they're not here yet, but theoretically will be. And thank you for taking the trouble to actually autograph books for your fans. It's very kind.
Gladly, gladly.
Right. So Ian, pop up and tell us if we have any questions. As usual, I've rambled around to the point where probably everybody's too confused to ask one.
I have a couple here for Donna. The first question is, what kind of research did you need to do for this novel?
I had to research the Nasseria story and find out exactly what happened, when, why, to whom. And so I spent a long time reading old newspaper articles, speaking to people. I found one person who had been not in Nasseria, but in Iraq, and talked about what was going on, what he thought was going on. And I did some research. I talked to the cops about baby gangs, and they're as confused by the two men to whom I spoke were as confused by them as I was. But they had to try to do something about them. I didn't.
Is there an opera that you would like to see that you haven't seen yet?
Great question.
Ah, yeah, I'd like to see. I've seen most of the ones I want to see. I would like to see some of the really minor Handel operas I've never seen. What is it? I just heard of one, like Parnaso in Festa, I think it's called. It's never, ever done. So I'd say Parnaso in Festa, if that's the proper name.
So who decides on minor works, that works are minor as compared to major, and therefore minor works aren't worth staging? It's always been an interesting question.
I think, yeah, it's an interesting problem. What decides? Who's deciding? Maybe it's the number of times that they are produced in reputable theaters in a year's time. The company with which I'm involved is Pomodoro, which is based in Switzerland and in Italy, is performing my favorite, Alcina, in December, I think. Yeah, it's December 5th, Alcina in Paris, and then we're in Madrid, and then we're in Vienna. And I'm going to go to them all because I adore Alcina and Giulio Cesare.
So how wonderful that you live in a situation where you can actually travel around to all three without, crossing the Atlantic or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what kept you in Europe all these years?
No. I think I would find it very difficult to live in the United States now. One of the reasons is linguistic, or people use expressions. People have verbal peculiarities that I find. The example I would give is like. The word like is thrown into anyone under the age of 25 can't say a sentence without using it. And it puzzles me that this has crept into, because we were born before like was said at every sentence. And the acrimony of the politics I find very, very unsettling.
You don't find Italian politics operatic?
I find it operatic, but that keeps it from being upsetting.
Ah, good distinction. Got it. It's not operatic here, and it's going to get worse, but we'll see what happens. I know. There's a bookstore for sale. One of my staff, Ian, you may not know this, but one of our staff thoughtfully forwarded to me the news that a bookstore in Nelson, New Zealand is up for sale. So I wrote back and said, how many of us are willing to relocate? We'll
Right.
find out. Right. Any other questions?
One last question. Will you ever be doing a US tour and perhaps make a stop at the Poison Pen bookstore?
If I make a US tour, I would stop at the Poison Pen bookstore. Happily, gladly. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know. I leave for one in England, but it's only 4 days. And they agreed that I could go and see a performance of Il Tempo the what is it called? The Tempo di Singano. I can't even remember the opera's name.
They're bribing you with a live performance, are they?
That's exactly it. I said,
Aha, now we know
yes,
what
if
Donna
I would
will
go to
sell out
England.
for.
Il trionfo di Tempo di Singano is at the Buxton Festival, and two of the singers are people who've sung with us, whom I've known for a long time, and I'd like to go. So maybe, yeah, so I'm going to the Buxton Festival, but I'm going to 5 days of more bookstores.
Sounds lovely. Maybe I can look up the Santa Fe Opera schedule and see if I can find a production. It's not
You're a sly devil,
lure
aren't you?
her over here, but unfortunately it's in the summer and I don't think Donna would survive our current temperature. As a final tip, I will tell you, when I was in London last month, there is a very nice restaurant now on top of the Royal Coven Opera House. And if you sit outside, it has an amazing view over the city on largely over Covent Garden, but other places. But anyway, I had lunch there, and it doesn't require a performance in the opera house. You can dine up there. So if you're there, you might want to get your publisher to take you there.
No, I think I've been piggy enough.
I see. Sounds wonderful. Is there anything else, Ian?
That was the last one.
That's it. Well, thank you again, Donna, for a
Thank
wonderful
you.
hour. It's always such a treat to talk to you. I'm sorry I never stay on topic with Donna, but it's so much fun to go down rabbit holes talking to her.
Yes.
I always
Yes.
do. Anyway, A Refiner's Fire, out and wonderful. And as I said, there are very different covers for the US and the British edition. I always find that so interesting, the way different publishers interpret, you know, how a book should be presented. But anyway, this is a lovely one, and I appreciate Grove Atlantic letting us have copies of it. So thank you to Grove Atlantic and to you and to all of you for watching it. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Arrivederci, right?
Arrivederci.